Technical briefing on product specifications. A meeting room at Precision Electronics. Senior Engineer Marco Bianchi is briefing a cross-functional team about specifications for a new product line.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this technical briefing on the specifications for our new XJ500 control system. Before we dive into the details, I want to emphasize the purpose of today's session. We must ensure that all departments understand the technical requirements so that we can avoid misinterpretations during development and production.
Marco, I appreciate this briefing. My team has to create materials that accurately represent the product's capabilities, but we often struggle with translating technical specifications into customer benefits.
That's exactly why we're having this meeting. Technical specifications must be understood across the organization, not just by the engineering team. Let me start with an overview of the key documentation you'll need to reference. First, we have the product specification document. This defines what the XJ500 must do and the standards it has to meet. It includes performance parameters, physical characteristics, environmental requirements, and compliance standards. You should consider this the definitive source for what constitutes a conforming product. Second, we have technical datasheets for major components. These provide detailed characteristics that engineers need to know when designing systems that will integrate with our product. You don't have to memorize these details, but you should know they exist and where to find them. Third, we have the interface specifications. These define how the XJ500 must interact with other systems. This is particularly important for the sales team, as customers will need to understand compatibility requirements.
Speaking of customers, what should we tell them about customization options? We often get requests for modifications to standard specifications.
Good question. The XJ500 has been designed with a modular architecture. The core functions must remain as specified, but Appendix C in the specification document outlines parameters that can be customized. You need to be very clear with customers that any customization outside these parameters would require a special engineering review. We cannot promise customizations that might compromise the system's integrity or certification status. From a manufacturing perspective, we need to understand the critical quality characteristics. Which parameters must be strictly controlled versus those where we have some tolerance?
The specification includes tolerance ranges for all parameters. Section 4 identifies the critical characteristics that must be 100% verified during production. These are primarily safety-related functions and performance parameters that directly affect system reliability. For these, we have to maintain detailed verification records. Other parameters should be controlled through our standard statistical process control methods. Let me show you an example of how to interpret the specification tables. If you look at page 12, you'll see the environmental operating conditions. Notice that temperature range is listed as -20 degrees Celsius to +50 degrees Celsius. This means the system must function within this entire range. However, the optimal performance range is listed as +5 degrees Celsius to +35 degrees Celsius. You should communicate to customers that while the system will operate in extreme conditions, they might experience some performance degradation outside the optimal range.
What about testing requirements? We'll need to develop verification protocols based on these specifications.
Section 7 details the testing requirements. Some tests must be performed on every unit, while others can be done on a sampling basis. Pay particular attention to the safety critical tests on page 24. These have to be performed on 100% of units with 0 defects allowed. You'll also notice that certain tests require calibrated equipment with specific accuracy levels. We need to ensure our test systems meet these requirements before production begins.
This is quite technical. How should we translate parameters like response time less than 200 milliseconds into benefits that customers can understand?
That's where we need collaboration. Engineering can explain the technical implications, but marketing should help translate these into user benefits. For example, the 200 millisecond response time means operators will experience virtually no delay between command and system response, which improves efficiency and reduces errors. We ought to work together on creating a benefits translation guide that accurately represents the technical capabilities without oversimplification.
What about the competitive comparison? Customers often ask how our specifications compare to competing products.
We've included a competitive analysis in Appendix D. However, you need to be careful when making direct comparisons. Some competitors use different testing methodologies or define parameters differently. You should focus on our verified performance rather than making specific claims about competitor shortcomings. If customers have detailed technical questions about comparisons, you ought to involve our technical team rather than speculating. I notice some specifications reference industry standards like IEC 61508. Do we need to understand all these standards? You don't need to be experts in all referenced standards, but you should understand their significance. For example, IEC 61508 relates to functional safety. When we state compliance with this standard, it means our system meets internationally recognized safety requirements for industrial applications. The compliance section on page 30 summarizes the key standards and their significance. Our regulatory team can provide more detailed explanations if needed.
What about specification changes? We've had issues in the past with mid-development changes that weren't properly communicated.
That's an important point. The specification is controlled through our document management system. Any changes must go through the formal change control process. All stakeholders have to review and approve significant changes, and the specification includes a revision history on page 2. You should always verify you're working with the current version before making any decisions based on the specifications. Additionally, we've created a specification change alert process. If any changes occur that might affect your department, you'll receive an automatic notification with details of the change and its potential impacts. To summarize, these specifications must guide all our work on the XJ500. Engineering has to design to these requirements, production has to manufacture to them, quality has to verify against them, and sales and marketing need to represent them accurately to customers. Are there any other questions about how to interpret or use these specifications?
Just one more. Where can we find simplified versions or summaries that might be more accessible for creating marketing materials?
We've created an executive summary on pages 3 to 5 that highlights the key features and benefits. Additionally, the product management team is working on a marketing-friendly version that should be available next week. You should collaborate with them to ensure it meets your needs while remaining technically accurate. If there are no other questions, I'd like to conclude by emphasizing that these specifications represent our commitment to customers. We must all understand and respect them. My team is available if you need help interpreting any technical details. Thank you for your attention.